The notification sound pierced through the silence of Grant Meyer's home office. Like a blade through silk ping, and with it, his marriage crumbled into pixels and shame. On his phone screen, a video played. Ela, his wife of 8 years, tangled in Egyptian cotton sheets with Marcus Chen, the venture capitalist who'd invested in Grant's first app. The timestamp showed last Tuesday, when she'd claimed to be at a wellness retreat in Malibu. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was public, visceral, and trending. Someone had leaked the security footage from their Hamptons house, the same house where Ela filmed her morning meditation videos for her 2 million followers. Within hours, #ElaExposed dominated social media feeds, complete with side-by-side comparisons of her inspirational quotes about authentic living. Next to screenshots of her infidelity, Grant sat motionless in his leather chair, watching his phone buzz incessantly with calls from reporters, friends, and his publicist. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd built an empire on connection, creating the social platform Connectal that brought people together. Yet he'd never felt more isolated. His app had facilitated countless relationships, but it couldn't save his own marriage from dissolving in real time across every major news outlet. Ela burst through his office door, her face streaked with mascara and desperation. "Grant, please, let me explain." But her words fell on deaf ears. He'd already seen enough explanations in the comments section, where internet detectives had uncovered a trail of indiscretions, spanning months, hotel receipts, restaurant photos, even LinkedIn connections that told a story of systematic deception. "How long?" His voice was steady, eerily calm for a man whose private life had just become entertainment for millions. "It doesn't matter now," she whispered, collapsing into the chair across from him. "They've destroyed everything. My brand, my partnerships, your marriage," Grant finished. Though his tone carried more resignation than anger, he understood better than most how quickly digital shame could spread. His own platform had been weaponized against his wife, and by extension, against him. The next 72 hours blurred together. In a haze of damage control meetings, legal consultations, and media statements, Ela disappeared from social media entirely. Her accounts managed by crisis management specialists who posted generic sunset photos, with vague captions about taking time to reflect. Meanwhile, Grant found himself fielding questions from board members about whether his personal scandal would affect Connectal's upcoming IPO. But something unexpected happened in the eye of this digital hurricane. Ela didn't run away or hide in shame like so many celebrities before her. Instead, she emerged with a strategy that would either rehabilitate her image or destroy what remained of her credibility. She decided to weaponize vulnerability itself, turning her greatest weakness into her greatest strength. The woman who had betrayed trust would now become the poster child for redemption. And Grant realized that his wife's most dangerous quality wasn't her capacity for deception, it was her ability to make people believe in her resurrection. 3 weeks after the scandal broke, Ela Myers appeared on the Truth and Healing podcast, her face bare of makeup, her voice trembling with what seemed like genuine remorse. The host, Sarah Kim, was known for her tough interviews, but even she appeared moved as Ela spoke about the darkness that consumed me and the woman I lost somewhere along the way. "I want to be clear," Ela said, her hands folded in her lap like a penitent child. "I'm not here to make excuses. I betrayed Grant, I betrayed my community, and most importantly, I betrayed myself. The woman in that video isn't who I am, but she's who I became when I stopped living authentically." The interview went viral for all the right reasons this time. Clips of Ela's tears, her raw confession about feeling empty despite having everything, resonated across social platforms. Comments poured in from women sharing their own stories of self-destructs, of losing themselves in the pursuit of perfection. #Ela's sorrow replaced #ElaExposed, and the narrative began to shift from condemnation to compassion. Grant watched from his office as his wife transformed her shame into a movement. She appeared on morning shows, speaking candidly about the prison of perfectionism and how social media had created an impossible standard for modern women. Each appearance was carefully orchestrated, the right amount of tears, the perfect balance of accountability and vulnerability. Her social media team, now led by a specialist in reputation rehabilitation, crafted posts that read like poetry about pain and growth. The transformation was remarkable. Isla's follower count, which had plummeted after the scandal, began climbing. Again, brands that had severed partnerships started reaching out tentatively. A major publisher offered her a book deal for what they called a raw, honest memoir about falling from grace and finding redemption. She's a master, Grant's publicist, Jennifer Walsh, told him during one of their weekly meetings. I've never seen someone pivot from scandal to inspiration this seamlessly. She's turned infidelity into a brand. But Grant saw something Jennifer missed. He watched Isla practice her interviews in their bedroom mirror, perfecting the exact moment when tears should fall, calibrating her voice to hit the precise note of brokenness that would generate the most sympathy. He observed her taking calls from her literary agent, discussing how to structure her memoir for maximum emotional impact. She'd transformed genuine shame into performance art. The most unsettling part wasn't the calculation, it was how genuine. Her emotions seemed to be in the moment. When she cried on camera, those tears were real. When she spoke about the pain she'd caused, her voice cracked with authentic regret. Isla had learned to weaponize her own suffering, to feel real remorse, while simultaneously monetizing it. She was simultaneously victim and victimizer, broken and calculating, destroyed and rebuilding herself into something more powerful than before. Grant realized he was witnessing something unprecedented. A woman who had turned betrayal into a career, who had made vulnerability her new brand of strength, and despite everything, the world was buying it hook, line, and sinker. Falling Forward, My Journey from Shame to Strength, debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list 6 months after Isla's scandal broke. The memoir was everything her audience craved: raw, honest, and filled with the kind of intimate details that made readers feel like confidants rather than consumers. Isla wrote about growing up with an emotionally distant mother, about the pressure to maintain perfection in the public eye, about how success had created a golden cage that drove her to seek validation in the arms of other men. The book tour was a masterclass in redemption theater. Isla appeared in bookstores across the country, her events selling out within hours. Women lined up for blocks to hear her speak, many clutching their own copies of the memoir like sacred texts. They wore t-shirts emblazoned with quotes from her book, Broken is just another word for becoming, and our wounds can be our wings. Grant attended one of her readings in Manhattan, sitting in the back row like a stranger in his own marriage. He watched as Isla commanded the stage with the confidence of a preacher, her voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. She spoke about their relationship with a reverence that made their marriage sound like a casualty of her personal war, rather than a victim of her choices. Grant is my hero, she told the audience, her eyes finding his in the crowd. He could have left me, any man would have, but he chose to stay and fight for us, to believe in my capacity for change. That kind of love doesn't just heal, it transforms. The audience erupted in applause, and Grant felt the familiar mix of admiration and revulsion that had become his default emotional state. Isla was magnificent on that stage, every word perfectly chosen, every gesture calibrated for maximum impact. She had turned their private pain into public inspiration, their marriage into a symbol of forgiveness and growth. But Grant knew what the audience didn't. He knew about the encrypted messaging app on Isla's phone, about the research calls for her next book that lasted hours longer than necessary. He knew about the hotel key cards hidden in her workout bag, about the sudden need for spiritual retreats with no documented location. The affairs had resumed, but now they were artfully concealed within the framework of her redemption narrative. She met men at book signings, at media interviews, at wellness conferences where she spoke about radical self-love. Her victims, because that's how Grant had begun to think of them, were drawn to her vulnerability like moths to flame. They saw themselves as part of her healing journey, as evidence of her capacity for genuine connection after such public destruction. Isla had created the perfect cover story, a woman so committed to growth and authenticity that every relationship, every connection, every intimate encounter became part of her spiritual evolution. She was no longer cheating. She was exploring the depths of human connection for her next book project. She wasn't being unfaithful. She was learning to love herself through loving others. The most disturbing part was how much she seemed to believe her own mythology. When she spoke about transformation, her conviction was absolute. When she cried about her past mistakes, those tears carried the weight of genuine remorse. Ela had achieved something remarkable. She had integrated deception so completely into her identity that lies and truth had become indistinguishable, even to herself. 2 years into Ila's redemption tour, their marriage had become performance art. Grant played the role of the forgiving husband with the same commitment. Ela brought to being the transformed woman. They appeared together at charity galas, her hand resting possessively on his arm as photographers captured their unbreakable bond. Magazine spreads featured them in their renovated Hamptons house, the same location where her original scandal had unfolded, now transformed into a symbol of renewal and second chances. "We chose love over pride," Ela told Vanity Fair in their cover story, titled "The Couple That Scandal Couldn't Break." The article painted them as a modern-day success story, proof that even the most public betrayals could be overcome with enough commitment and courage. Grant played his part perfectly, discussing how Ila's journey toward authenticity had actually strengthened their relationship. But behind closed doors, their marriage operated on a different set of rules entirely. They maintained separate wings of their Manhattan penthouse, crossing paths primarily for public appearances and carefully choreographed social media moments. Grant threw himself into expanding Connectal internationally, spending weeks at a time in London and Tokyo, while Ela worked on her second book, tentatively titled Beyond Forgiveness: The Art of Radical Love. The new affairs were masterfully integrated into her public narrative. Dr. Jonathan Rivers, the trauma therapist she'd begun seeing for research on her next book, became a regular feature in her Instagram stories. She posted photos of their intense healing sessions at his upstate retreat, her face glowing with what she called therapeutic breakthrough energy. Her followers celebrated her commitment to growth, unaware that the breakthrough energy came from something far more primal than therapy. Then there was Alessandro Marchetti, the Italian photographer documenting her book tour across Europe. Ela shared artistic black and white images of their creative collaboration, calling him a master of capturing the soul's journey through light. The photographs were stunning intimate portraits that showed Ela in moments of vulnerability and strength. What her audience didn't see were the hotel receipts from Rome, Florence, and Venice, where their artistic partnership extended far beyond professional boundaries. Grant discovered each affair with the methodical precision of a detective, but he no longer felt the sharp sting of betrayal. Instead, he felt something more complex, a mixture of fascination and disgust at his wife's ability to transform infidelity into inspiration. She had become a master of emotional alchemy, turning every transgression into content for her growing empire of vulnerability. The most remarkable aspect was how her affairs seemed to fuel her public messaging about love and commitment. After particularly intense encounters with her various lovers, Ila's social media posts became more profound, her speaking engagements more powerful. She spoke about the courage to love deeply and embracing the full spectrum of human connection, with the authority of someone who had explored every possible interpretation of those concepts. Grant began to understand that his role in this performance wasn't as the betrayed husband. It was as the enabler of Ila's transformation into something unprecedented. She wasn't just a reformed cheater. She was a woman who had transcended traditional concepts of fidelity entirely. She had created a new paradigm where infidelity became research, where betrayal became a form of spiritual exploration, where her marriage to Grant served as the stable foundation that allowed her to explore the depths of human connection without consequence. The world loved her for it, and Grant realized that leaving her now would make him the villain in her story, the man who couldn't handle her evolution, who was threatened by her journey toward radical authenticity. By the 3rd anniversary of her scandal, Ela Myers had built an empire on the ruins of her reputation. The Ela Myers Institute for Authentic Living occupied 3 floors of a gleaming Manhattan high-rise, offering workshops, retreats, and certification programs for what she called vulnerability coaches. Her podcast, Conversations with Courage, regularly topped the charts, featuring interviews with other public figures who had survived scandals and emerged stronger. The Institute's flagship program, the falling forward method, promised to help participants transform their deepest shame into their greatest strength. Women flew in from across the globe to attend her intensive weekends, paying $5,000 for the privilege of sharing their most painful secrets in group sessions. That Ela led with the gravitas of a revival preacher. Grant watched from his corner office at Connectal as Ila's influence expanded beyond personal development into cultural commentary. She testified before Congress about cyberbullying and digital shame, advocating for legislation to protect people from the kind of public humiliation she had endured. She launched a foundation supporting women who had been canceled by social media, providing legal aid and mental health resources. The irony wasn't lost on Grant. His wife had become the patron saint of scandal survival. Her second book, Beyond Forgiveness, had spawned a documentary series on Netflix that followed several women. Through Ila's program, the cameras captured raw moments of breakthrough and healing, with Ela serving as both guide and participant. She wept alongside her clients, sharing her own ongoing struggles with what she called the addiction to perfection. The series won 2 Emmy nominations and further cemented her status as a thought leader in the trauma recovery space. But Grant knew the truth behind the empire. He had hired private investigators who documented Ila's continuing affairs with clinical precision. The reports read like a catalog of her expansion into new markets. The venture capitalist she met at a tech conference in Austin. The best-selling author she mentored during a writing retreat. In Big Sur, the mindfulness instructor from her wellness center in Tulum. Each affair followed the same pattern: initial contact through her professional network, gradually deepening spiritual connection, followed by physical intimacy framed as part of her research into human connection. She documented these relationships in encrypted journals that she claimed were for her third book, tentatively titled The Architecture of Intimacy, a radical exploration of love. The most disturbing discovery was how she incorporated these experiences into her public teachings. A weekend with the venture capitalist in Austin became a workshop module about embracing masculine energy for personal empowerment. Her affair with the author inspired a podcast series about creative collaboration and sexual energy. The mindfulness instructor's techniques found their way into her institute's curriculum as samadhi. See approaches to emotional healing. Ela had achieved something unprecedented. She had made infidelity invisible by making it meaningful. Every betrayal served a higher purpose. Every affair contributed to her understanding of human nature. Every act of deception became data for her mission, to help others live more authentically. Grant realized that his wife had transcended traditional morality entirely. She operated in a space beyond right and wrong, where intention mattered more than action, where the ends justified any means, and where her personal journey toward radical authenticity gave her license to explore every dimension of human experience. Without consequence. The world celebrated her for it, and Grant understood that he was no longer married to a woman. He was married to a movement, a brand, an idea that had consumed the person he once loved and replaced her with something far more powerful and far more terrifying. 4 years after the scandal that should have ended her career, Ela Myers stood before a sold-out audience at Madison Square Garden, delivering the keynote address for the International Conference on Trauma and Transformation. 20,000 people hung on her every word as she spoke about the courage to live in radical truth and the power of authentic vulnerability. Grant sat in the VIP section, watching his wife command the stage with the presence of a prophet. She wore a simple white dress that seemed to glow under the stage lights, her voice carrying the weight of hard-won wisdom as she shared her story of fall and resurrection. The audience was mesmerized, many weeping openly as she described her journey from shame to strength. 4 years ago, I was destroyed, Ela said, her voice cracking with practiced emotion. I had betrayed everything I claimed to value, hurt the person I loved most, and lost myself completely. But in that destruction, I found something unexpected: the possibility of becoming someone entirely new. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause, and Grant felt the familiar mixture of awe and revulsion that had become his default emotional state. Ela had achieved something remarkable. She had turned personal failure into professional triumph, private pain into public inspiration, moral bankruptcy into spiritual currency. But as Grant watched his wife bask in the adoration of thousands, he finally understood the truth that had eluded him for years. Isla's tears were real, they always had been. Her remorse was genuine, her pain authentic, her desire for transformation sincere. But none of that had stopped her from continuing. The very behaviors that had caused all that suffering in the first place. She wasn't a sociopath or a master manipulator. She was something more complex and more human, a woman who could feel genuine remorse, while simultaneously planning her next transgression, who could weep real tears over her failures while documenting them for her next book deal, who could build an empire on the foundation of her own authentic shame, while using that empire to justify continued betrayal. Isla had discovered something profound about human nature, that sincerity and deception could coexist, that truth and lies could dance together, that a person could be simultaneously broken and calculating, victim and victimizer, saint and sinner. She had learned to weaponize her own pain so effectively that even she couldn't tell where the performance ended and the person began. As the applause continued and Isla took her bow, Grant made a decision that had been for years in the making. He would stay married to this woman who had turned infidelity into a calling, betrayal into a brand, and deception into a form of truth-telling, not because he forgave her, not because he loved her, but because leaving her would make him complicit in destroying the very thing she had built from the ashes of their marriage. Proof that anyone could rise from any fall, that redemption was always possible, that transformation was real even if the person being transformed remained fundamentally unchanged. The world needed Isla Myers, the redeemed woman, more than it needed the truth about Isla Myers, the woman who continued to cheat while preaching about authentic love. Grant understood that his silence was the final gift he could give to a world desperate to believe in second chances, even if those second chances were built on a foundation of carefully orchestrated lies. In the end, perhaps that was the most authentic thing about Isla's journey. It perfectly reflected the human capacity for self-deception, the ability to believe in our own transformation, while remaining trapped in the very patterns we claim to have transcended. What, do you think, is Isla's impact on the world, helping thousands of people heal from shame and find redemption worth more than the ongoing deception in her personal life? Does the authenticity of her pain and the genuineness of her desire to help others justify the continued betrayal of her marriage? Or does her behavior negate everything positive she's accomplished?